Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our tours through Washington State's Point Defiance Zoo, a small park that has a lot to offer. As many learned in my full breakdown in the corner of your screen, in only 29 acres it's home to over 9,000 animals, which is way more than the average zoo amount. However, it only has around 20 species of mammals, a few kinds of birds, a couple reptiles here and there, but there's so much sea life that the zoo needed not one, but 2 separate buildings to house them all. Now, before we explore those buildings, if you are new and like getting free virtual visits to the zoo, I recommend pressing those sub and bell buttons to officially join our zoo crew. Previously, I asked you all, what never-before-featured zoo would you like to see this year? Now I want to know specifically what never-before-featured exhibit you like to see on the channel this year. The Tropical Reef Aquarium might be the very first stop of your visit, which I recommend doing that because you might run into shoulder-to-shoulder traffic later in the day. The silver lining, though, is that you might not be in here for long regardless, and neither will we today. The first thing that really caught my eye, it allowed a lot of natural light in compared to other aquariums, which really helped build that tropical feel. Second thing I noticed was the clearly very popular touch tank. Can't really say you have an aquarium if you don't have one of those. Now I wish more aquariums had what became one of my favorite habitats in the zoo, an open-topped stingray beach. Great, we've seen those before, but it was built to be so natural looking, you could say it's practically barrierless, and the only thing that's stopping us from getting our feet wet is a palm tree that's gone sideways. It's filled from an overflow of the lagoon, where the sandy beach slopes into a shallow coral reef, home to 30 fishes, including 2 varieties of small sharks that I did not spot. I was happy to see that this was open-topped as well. I'll never complain about a backdrop mural, and having the coral come out of the water was a nice touch. And pretty much like all faux coral, they are vibrant and complement the colors of the living and more mobile creatures around it very well. But the depths get even deeper. On the steps is the glistening so-called blue hole, built to mimic a deep-sea cavern where fish and other small critters use for shelter and a place to eat. And this one gives a sneak preview of the outer reef, a 240,000-gallon tank that mimics the outer shelf of a coral reef, the second biggest tank in the zoo. I'm not sure how much of a visual expert on gallon amount you are, but this doesn't really look like 240,000 gallons. But that's because it goes off to the right side where you can't really see a good chunk of it. I'm told by someone who was kind enough to put together a species list, which you can read below, this holds 18 total sharks from 6 different kinds. That's a lot of teeth, and I believe it's the most I've ever seen in one space. As if that didn't make this tank amazing on its own, you can actually pay to be on the other side of these windows. Point Defiance is one of the few animal institutions to offer shark cage dives for $115 for non-members, which includes zoo admission and a souvenir video of your 20-minute in-water experience. If that sounds like your kind of adventure, there's a link to the encounter in the comments. So this is where our time touring the Tropical Reef Aquarium will end, even though it's not the last display. These are, but they were closed at the time. The exit trail will push us into a different kind of tropical realm, the tropics of the Asian Forest Sanctuary, a simple looking but very complex attraction, which we will not tour today because we already have. See the card in the corner. We'll be taking a left into the Discovery Hut behind the aquarium. It's what I would call the zoo's main pit stop. You can eat and use the restroom, and while you're all charged up or charging up, this station also provides close animal encounters. But rather than the keepers holding the animals to let you pet them, the keepers let them roam around as much as they can, although some care to move more than others. They're kind of easy to miss if you ask me, but the sheltered part of the area shelters a barn owl that I didn't expect to see, and there's even a wonderful terrarium for a rhinoceros iguana, one of the few reptiles actually on display at the zoo. If you go to this area from the other side, you'll run into the tide pool, or what used to be a tide pool. It's now been drained. From my understanding, I guess the idea is that the pools were filled from the runoff in the old aquarium that's right behind this. Something that I'll get to in a second. But no matter which way you go, you cannot miss the Penguin Point. Not just because it would be wrong to miss out on some penguins, you'll physically be drawn towards this. The Penguin Point opened up in 1989, and it kind of holds up as one of the most natural-looking penguin habitats I've ever seen. If some of you are wondering why there's no ice or winter wonderland, these are Magellanic penguins, and their enclosure reflects the rocky beaches of South America's southern coasts, which is a little warmer than the climate around the South Pole. Many of you know that zoo penguins can be identified from the bands on their wings. From what I saw, you could not identify them at the zoo itself. But if you go to their website in the Penguin Point section and scroll around, every single penguin has a bio with their hatch date, reason for their name, and their personality. Located smack dab in the middle between the Discovery Hut and our next destination is the Wild Wonders Outdoor Theater, home to the most unique animal presentation I've ever witnessed, and that's putting it nicely. You can see and hear just a bit more of my thoughts on it if you go to my full breakdown, because we have to move on. So you'd be lucky enough to see one aquarium in a zoo, but Point Defiance famously has two. In order to properly introduce you to the Pacific Seas Aquarium, I need to go back to the tropical one real quick. If you were to Google the Tropical Reef Aquarium, you'll most likely get articles talking about the 2024 grand reopening after a $7 million restoration. The habitats themselves received minor touch-ups, but the real upgrades were behind the scenes. This 15,000 square foot complex opened in 1989, labeled as the South Pacific Aquarium, and it's connected to the once beloved North Pacific Aquarium that opened in 1963. South Pacific got a name change and a facelift. North Pacific closed in 2018, but that same year, the theme was survived and moved to the $52 million, 35,000 square foot Pacific Seas Aquarium. With about 400,000 gallons, it's dedicated to life in Puget Sound that's just beyond the zoo's border, all the way down to the warm depths of the Gulf of California. Your first encounter with the Pacific Seas is actually outside, the thing that made these concrete walls a little prettier. A 4,500-gallon tidal surge tank with sea stars, anemones, salmon, kelp, and algae. Every minute or so, a flood or surge of bubbly white foam crashes through the tank, representing how waves and tides bring fresh nutrients to animals in the area. As soon as you enter in the building, you'll actually face the grandest tank in the entire zoo. But since this is also the finale, we will just ignore that for now. The upper gallery continues with a couple of Pacific Seas classics, a staple to aquariums if you ask me. Japanese spider crabs, the largest existing arthropod in the world. They prefer the seabed by vents and holes that are 2,000 feet below the surface. Over here we have what's called a schooling fish tank, with a school of Pacific herring, showing their loyalty to moving around in this endless circle. It's not quite as full as the similar mackerel tank at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, but maybe one day, this school will grow into the fish NATO every schooling fish dreams of creating. If you were paying attention to the tropical reef segments, you saw that aquariums can get hectic. But jelly galleries are the cure for drowning out all the noise. There's just something so calming about watching these gelatinous creatures floating aimlessly. Whether it's against an empty blue backdrop or a color-changing globe. Although if you're more flat like the upside down jelly, you won't be doing a lot of floating. We actually learned on another episode they do this because algae lives in their tissue, and by lying upside down, they're exposing the algae to the sun, allowing it to photosynthesize, and in turn the jelly will live off of the algae's byproducts. The pathway in beautiful fashion will descend us even further into the spotlight on the sound gallery. What sound? The Puget Sound, of course. There are 9 total tanks with over 60 species. Everything on the right side features creatures that can be really tough to find. I'm talking about both in the wild and even in here. Some are just that small, others make you question whether or not you're looking at a real living organism, and then you have ones that are just really good at hiding. I promise one of these days an octopus will make it on this channel. So like all Pacific themed aquariums, eventually you're going to run into a lot of kelp. They really love that stuff up here. The coastal kelp forest replicates the California coast. According to the map, I was promised leopard sharks, but ended up seeing something even better. The California sheephead is a colorful, clearly intelligent-looking wrasps. They sport a very strong chin and canine teeth that can crush urchins, crabs, and other shellfish. Apparently, this is Buddy, who lived in the old aquarium and has been a fan favorite for years. What was also a fan favorite, the Northwest Waters, 100,000 gallons full of stunning wildlife sheltered under a pier, just in case you ever wanted to know what it looks like under one of these in the Pacific Northwest. Complete with barnacle-encrusted pillings, 400 total sea anemones that have to be individually hand-fed, along with 15 other species behind a 25-foot wide, 10-foot tall window. Even though I was able to get up close to the one in the tropical aquarium, I didn't personally take part in the opportunity to pet anything over here. But just letting you know that your family's favorite might be the tidal touch zone, where you can get hands-on with sea stars, crabs, and a lot more. And then around the corner is the final descent that reveals the Pacific Seas ends exactly how it begins. This is the Baja Bay, both the last thing that you see and the very first thing that you see when you walk right into the building. Some sources say that it's either 250,000 gallons, others say it's 280,000 gallons. Whatever, it's still the largest aquatic display in the entire zoo and offers a breathtaking view. Why have full tunnel when half tunnel do trick? The blue, balmy waters replicates the subtropics of Baja California. According to the zoo site, there's one Atlantic green sea turtle from the Omaha Zoo, so there's a good chance that we've seen them before, along with 2 Pacific green sea turtles that actually hatched at SeaWorld San Diego in 2003. There's 4 gorgeous and endangered white-spotted eagle rays. And before you get your hopes up if you're planning on making a visit anytime soon, obviously hammerheads are the buildings or one of the zoo's star attractions, but I'll just put it lightly that they are no longer here. And that, my friends, will conclude our tours of the Point Defiance Zoo's Tropical Reef and Pacific Seas aquariums, which will most likely be the only and last time we ever explore 2 aquatic buildings in one episode. The next time that you hear from me, we'll be moving on from the ocean's depths and into the rocky shores to meet some of the cutest and rarest zoo animals that you'll ever find. So as always, please stay tuned for the next episode. Stay wild, and thank you all for watching Zoo Tours.